Welcome to the Potion Podcast, your raw look at the hospitality industry, brought to you by SHC. What is happening, Potions? Welcome back to another episode of the Potion Podcast. I'm looking forward today. Reece Sims has been a friend and a guest and a peer for many, many years, since originally the first time I was at Clive. So I'm really looking forward to chatting to her about everything that is for... I'm just going to click another button here and we're good to go. Perfect. I'm doing new things today, so if you're listening, I apologize. If you're watching, you understand. So I'm really looking forward to chatting to her about her entrepreneurial journey and sort of seeing how that has fitted into her life over the last couple of years. So I'm just going to bring her up. Good morning.
Hello.
How are you this morning?
Good. I'm feeling better than I thought I would.
You judged a big cocktail competition yesterday, didn't you?
Pardon me?
You judged a cocktail competition yesterday, didn't you?
Yeah. So I actually behind the scenes organized a multi-day pop and then organized the competition and the tasting with the brand for industry here. And then because of that, I got to assign myself to be the head judge. It's a pro tip. If you ever want to be a judge, just organize everything and then you can make yourself the judge.
How was the competition?
It was great. I did a little post on my story last night, but I just as a former bartender who used to compete, I'm just always so impressed with seeing kind of the next gen of people competing. I'm like, damn, people are so creative these days. I would be so bad and come in last place against everybody else.
Well, this thing is I keep getting asked to do world class again. I'm like, I don't want to do world class again. These kids would just run circles around me.
Yeah. So I was very impressed. For sure.
Obviously, you have a long bartending experience. What was the sort of driver that made you and inspire you to sort of go out on your own and start building this personal brand and this entrepreneurship for you?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like I don't actually have that much bartending experience, and it was a means to an end. Can I backstory for your
Yes, of
listeners?
course. Yes, please.
Yeah, so Shawn and I met in 2009 when I'm from Victoria originally, and I was serving at Cafe Mexico in university, but kind of did day bar, but it was pouring, we had a gun with the preset amount of tequila and triple sec on it, and then would pour this slurpy version of a margarita into the glass kind of bartending. But anyways, so I kind of have always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and then bartending somehow got a hold of me, and then I ended up doing it in this industry. But yeah, when we first met, I was working in marketing at the Bay Center shopping center, and we were both in the social media club in Vancouver. And at the time, I feel like that's when things like Facebook and Twitter were just starting, and Instagram. And
Yep.
So I would always go and sit at Shawn's bar because I don't know, before that, I didn't really know what a cocktail was, and was always amazed by your hospitality, but also just skills as a OG cocktail bartender in Victoria. But yeah, I feel like from a young age, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and it was just figuring out how to do it. And to be honest, I still am figuring it out, but I just absolutely love the hospitality industry and knew I wanted to do something in it. And a combination of that and just applying for jobs like brand ambassador jobs and getting rejected just made me fuel the fire to want to just do my own thing and do it on my own terms, I guess. So
Isn't it crazy that we're talking 15 years ago, Clive's opened and Twitter was just becoming a thing at 15 years ago.
Yeah,
and then Instagram came along, I think a couple of years after that. And that I remember social media camp, and I remember walking home at night from Clive's and answering tweets on the way home.
Yeah.
Because that's what you did. It was a big part of your business at that time, making sure you had an online presence. And 15 years ago is not that long ago.
Yeah, it's honestly flown by so fast. The other thing at the time that was really popular, and this pertains to Clives too, is there is an app called Foursquare where you could like
Yep.
check in and then you would get points for checking in at locations. But it got kind of creepy because I would like check in at Clives like while I was there, and then people would just show up and be like, "Oh, I saw on Foursquare that you were like here tonight." And I thought it was cool, but in retrospect, I'm like, "Ugh, that's kind of uncomfortable."
It's kind of like just putting a nice bright light on top of your head and going, "Hey, I'm here."
No.
I remember those times too. Like people would be sitting at the bar, and then all of a sudden people would come. Oh, I saw that you were here, so I thought I'd come and hang
Yeah.
out with you. And you're just like, oh, okay, cool. I just wanted a quiet drink by myself.
Yeah, but I guess ultimately I didn't really understand that. Like, I feel like that app would actually should make a comeback now because that would be cool to like have people come to the bar that you're drinking at if you want them to, but just obviously don't post if you don't want people to know
Yeah.
you're there. But
So when you started your entrepreneurial journey, Whiskey Muse, what was the direction that you were taking? As you said, like you're still trying to work out, and I think especially with the modern TikTok and that sort of thing, a lot of young bartenders are sort of trying to figure out how to make that leap across, and then sort of not necessarily, well, you have to monetize it, but how do you focus in your passion into a new project that you're leading and you're driving?
yeah.
Um, how did you do that? And did you have a sort of direction and a focus, or was it sort of in the beginning, sort of throwing some stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, and if it stuck, like keep doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. I was just having this conversation with my partner yesterday where I'm like, I'm just constantly trying stuff. I think you're similar in that regard where it's like you get really excited about an idea and then like put some time and effort into it, and there has to be a certain point where either it starts thriving and you keep rolling with it, or
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't and you realize it's sucking all your time and resources and you have to move on to the next thing. But yeah, for me, like with Whiskey Muse, I don't know if that was necessarily me, like my entrepreneurial journey. Maybe it was like the precursor to it, but I've just always been really cognizant of how important it is to have a personal brand. Like when I went to UVic, I did a business degree, and this idea of having a personal brand, again around the like 2000, I don't know, 7 to 9 era. I think I graduated in like 2010 technically. Um, there it was like, oh, this is a way you can differentiate yourself. At the time, the economic recession was making it so the job market was really crappy, and so I just kind of turned to like recognizing having a personal brand was important as a way to have your resume jump off out of the pile, or just being able to network your way into getting jobs. And I've been really fortunate in essentially being able to network my way into a lot of positions to this day. But anyways, so I was working in marketing, like hated sitting in an office, and that's sort of what drove me to get into bartending. Is I needed to make money living in Vancouver. And one of the things, like my first bartending job here was at the Blarney Stone, which is a Irish pub, and they had an enormous amount of whiskeys on their shelf. And again, as somebody who was just like, okay, I'm a woman who wants to bartend, how can I learn as much as possible and also stand out in the industry as quickly as possible? I just decided to focus on whiskey. I sort of made like a list of um, 10 hobbies or things I was interested in. And then just kind of went through this like mental checklist of like, is this in terms of like starting a blog or like
Mm-hmm.
attaching a personal brand to it? Like, is this something where the industry is evergreen and constantly evolving? Like, is this something that will continue to grow and change over time? Is there money in that market where brands and like other organizations are willing to spend money to like promote or market things? And then for like, do I actually genuinely like it and think it's cool and it's something I want to learn more about? And so yeah, I had this short list of like, I don't know, fitness activities and whiskey and other spirits, and was just like, okay, I think there's not a lot of young female voices in this industry, like whiskey specifically. It's kind of male, pale, and stale, as some people say. And so I'm like,
I've never heard that one, and I'm going to use that one way
yeah.
more often now.
But I was like, okay, let's just do this, and I can provide kind of a different perspective and voice. And I think the best way to learn is by doing, right? And so I just started the Whiskey Muse blog when I started working at the Blarney Stone, and so that really kind of held myself accountable to trying to learn as much as possible and then share it. And kind of like along my journey, kind of share what I was learning. And I mean, at the beginning, it's like what you put out there is usually really crappy. And like in retrospect, I look back in at some of the first posts I did and just even like photos of cocktails or ideas that I had. And I don't know, I started a YouTube channel and everything is like on private now because it's so cringe to me. I'm just like, oh my God, this is all terrible. Like, what was I thinking? But you just kind of grow and evolve and like learn more and then become more comfortable like as you do stuff repetitively. And yeah, like, sorry, I'm going on kind of a tangent, but
Oh no, that's good.
um, eventually helped me to differentiate myself, like a combination of blogging and building like a brand online around whiskey, competing in as many cocktail competitions as I could just to like meet the reps, meet other cool bartenders that are nerdy that want to learn and like do stuff. And then just like constantly reaching out and asking questions and like following up with these reps about like what kind of experience you need, like what you need to do in order to become a brand ambassador or a sales rep. And then eventually, just after a number of years, the cards sort of aligned. And yeah, I ended up like moving from being a bartender. And during that time, I worked at like multiple different bars, typically working at like two at once just to have more variety. And then moved into a territory sales manager role up until COVID. But oddly, I was like applying for brand ambassador positions and there was just more experienced people that were constantly getting the job. It was kind of a catch-22. And one director took a chance and was like, I think you would be really good at sales. Like, would you be interested in being a sales manager instead? And I was like, yeah, let's try it out. And I guess the rest is sort of history, or the rest evolved from there. I don't even think I explained how I actually started my company
No,
out of that.
I think you did. I think you did a good job of that. But that leads me to like your big project now, which is Flavor Camp, which you're now
Yeah.
taking like I would say was it nationwide plus the US? Like you just did one in the US too, didn't you?
Yeah, I did one in Kentucky in August, which was really cool.
Yeah. So
To
explain to everybody where Flavor Camp came from and like where and how it's sort of evolving into such a because it's your pretty much your big focus right now, yeah?
Yeah, for sure. Like the brand itself is, but I feel like I'm trying to create more definition to talk about the each like product or thing that's happening under the Flavor Camp umbrella. But yeah, so essentially like my business kind of came out of, I guess, a culmination of things that I wish I had access to as both a bartender and a sales rep. And that's sort of a connection to like almost like unbiased education with around brands where people are having an opportunity to try things side by side versus just the portfolio, like one
Mm.
portfolio, one distillery's products. Just to be able to compare and contrast. Also, like I wanted to become a better blind taster, be able to articulate myself with tasting notes, but found it extremely intimidating to go to tastings and just, I don't know, be like feeling awkward or vulnerable trying to guess or understand how to taste. And so that was one side of it on the bartending side, and just like having more tasting and educational opportunities for bartenders. And then on the brand side, I just felt kind of at the top level with the agency I worked with, a lot of decision making from the brand managers was sort of based on like gut. And I was just like,
Mm.
yeah, go do this and it's going to be cool. We're going to spend all our marketing dollars on this. And I'm like, there has to be a better way where we're actually like asking people what they want so then we can give them what they want. Right. And so kind of the purpose of Flavor Camp is for me to be like a third party expert to be able to connect like brands and consumers or brands and bartenders together and do that through having two-way conversations instead of me just talking at people for a tasting and telling them how amazing everything is. I'd rather get like a full spectrum of feedback from them to give back to those brands and say like, this is what people's taste preferences are right now based on their demographics. This is what people are liking in this market. This is what people aren't liking. This is their objections to purchase. This is why they want to purchase stuff. And so that kind of like helps to inform the market in Canada and hopefully like, I guess, the world. So I've kind of like tied in all these different things, like wanting to be able to learn how to taste in a more simplified visual way, because I've always been a visual learner. So the Flavor Camp like tasting system came out of that to just like create independent category or way to categorize spirits based on flavor first, not necessarily what country they come from, their age, their price point. It's their like flavor profile. Because I don't know, we kind of like organize food that way. So why wouldn't you do spirits in a similar way versus just like organizing them on a liquor store shelf or in a bar based on what country they came from, but they have absolutely nothing to do with each other in terms of how they taste. So I just feel like that's a easier way to like explain and recommend things. And then second to that is like the way, like that's one part, but I'm like, I don't think that I would be able to make this into a full-time thing by just running tastings and having people buy tickets to them. So where the brands get value is they will like pay to participate in my programs, and I provide like market feedback back to them. So like all of my tastings, like you sat in on one of them, people fill out a workbook, and I think it's good because they get that chance to like learn how to taste and like write their feedback, and there's no right or wrong answers. And then I consolidate all of that into a report back to the brands so they can see how they compare against their competitors in that lineup, how their product is received, feedback on it. And I'm not sure if they can necessarily make changes if they're like a multinational brand, but at least that can like, again, inform what the Canadian market's palate and preferences are, so they can give that back to their suppliers, like as agencies, and say like, hey, maybe this is why this product's underperforming, or hey, maybe this is justification why we need to like readjust the pricing on this product in this market. So yeah, it's just I'm brokering like information essentially, and then educating people on how to learn what they want and ask for what they want. I guess.
How have the brands taken it? Because I find a lot of the times brands tend to get into their own echo chamber
Mhm.
of like they've got their marketing people, they've got the same sort of old school mentalities towards things. Like I remember speaking to a brand many years ago about marketing, and they were really hyped up about a radio ad and a billboard on the side of the highway. And I'm like, who listens to the radio unless it's a really, really good like morning
Yeah.
show or something? And who's not on their phone looking for billboards? And they were really hyped up about that, how much money they'd spent on it and that sort of thing. So how do the brands approach that feedback when you give it to them? Have you got a good response from most of them?
Um, so I've been running different feedback programs again over the last like 3 years, I guess. And for Flavor Camp, if I'm being completely honest, I'm not convinced that people actually thoroughly read the reports or take action on them, even though they're jam packed with a ton of valuable, like actionable insights. But um, yeah, like I think people will just skim the top line because typically I'll put like the summary of feedback, and then there's like 100 pages of appendices with like a lot of detailed information, and I send them the raw data that they can dive into deeper to see like segments of feedback. But I don't think anybody actually does that. Um, Even though I'd like them to, but it's like a lot of work. Um, but I think where the value lies is some brands do, some just don't have brand ambassadors to run these tastings, and it's not like that expensive for them to participate at this point. So they have an opportunity to get liquid to lips at the very least with like 100 plus or hundreds of people in a thorough and informative way that like no shade on like tastings or like big exhibition events, but it's just a more intimate setting where I'm actually educating people on stuff. I get to talk about it directly with myself because I'm not working for the brand, so they don't feel like they need to be positive or negative or have any kind of sentiment other than what they genuinely think, if that makes sense. So I think that's like valuable in and of itself, and just sort of aligning themselves with me and my brand. But yeah, there's been other programs. Like I ran one last year that brands were excited about, and then nobody wanted to do it this year, where I had like 12 or 12 to 15 experts from across Canada, like one in each province, more or less, or a couple. And I like blind tasted them on products like you would in like a spirits competition. They rated them and wrote tasting notes and feedback. And I was like, for better, for worse, we're posting this. And I think some of the brands, well, I don't think they communicated to me that it like was a disservice to their product because they didn't get like favorable scores as they wanted. And I'm like, I totally get that from a brand manager perspective, but also being authentic, I think, is important. And if you aren't confident in this product, like, one, why are you selling it? And two, why did you send it to me to want to use in this program when you knew that you were going to get feedback on the product?
Also, wouldn't you want to know about your deficiencies? Like, I
Yeah.
feel like Flavor Camp and everything you've explained is like the midsection of the market. Like, you do those top tier, crazy, big exhibition shows where you've got 5,000 people in a room, and you know exactly how many people came through your thing and how much booze you went through. Oh, everybody's drinking the 18-year-old because most, what do you just call them, pale, stale, and
Pale male
uh,
stuff.
pale male stale. Like, will only drink 18-year-old single malts and then go crazy over octomores. And I'm like,
Yeah.
you're an idiot. But then other data they get is from like retail, which is their high volume stuff. And so of course Jägermeister sells really hard and retail, and certain
Mhm.
brands sell really hard in retail. You've got this very honest, authentic mid-range in the market where you're
Yeah.
getting much more realistic answers to the brand.
Yeah, well, there's a couple. So I guess there's a couple things with this. Like what I'm doing, I'm definitely not targeting high end, high value individuals with like rare products. And I don't think I would ever be somebody who like focuses on that because it's just like a very small percentage of people that are actually interested in purchasing those kind of items. And I totally like think that really rare, expensive products have a place in the market and are important, but there's just a lot of things in that mid range of like, I don't know, 60 to like 150 or maybe $200 absolutely tops, that people want to try before they buy. So it's a good opportunity for them to do that. And like, I'm not, my target demographic for the content and the people that I'm like working with is not pale male stale demographic. So like I tell brands that want to work with me, like my demographic are typically people like 25 to 50 tops, more like 30 to 45. And I can show that in the data because I'm capturing that. And so it's more like a millennial Gen X-ish and like Gen Z-ish, but mostly millennial market, and mostly couples that come to my tastings and people without kids, so they have disposable income. So it's like if you're looking to get more into that market, and women in particular, not that I exclusively focus on women, but it just happens to be that like 50% of the audience that comes to my tastings and stuff are women, which is great. These are, I just feel like, untapped markets that haven't historically been marketed to, and maybe they are in the mix for these big exhibitions, but to be able to just like focus specifically on that demographic, I think is one of the main value adds for doing the programs that I do. But again, I think like those bigger exhibitions where you're like, oh, we went through this much product and sampled this many people, that's good for getting liquid to lips, but like you don't know if people are going to remember your product after the fact or if they liked it or not, and like, or anything about those, who was there or what happened. And so I'm really trying to actually capture that information to give
Yeah,
back.
we've both been to plenty of big whiskey show tastings, and it the first half hour is very dignified. After that, it just turns into a junk show. Doesn't matter what sort of kilt you're wearing, or what suit you're wearing, or what you're wearing, and you got all dressed up. By the end of it, everybody is just loaded.
Yeah.
We talked about it a little bit before when it came to throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. How do you balance your creativity with like business side of things? Flavor Camp is obviously very. You've got two sides of a very specific coin. You've got very, very fun experimentation on like creativity and putting on the Flavor Camp, but then you're also knuckling down 100 pages of data. How do you balance out your creativity with business side of things?
Um, I don't know if there is a balance. Again, I'm just constantly trying things and then seeing what the market wants, both from the brand side and consumer side. So again, a big part of my what I do, like every program I'm trying to do has some sort of two-way communication aspect to it, or has like a user generated content aspect to it. So let me just backtrack. Like essentially right now I've kind of settled on 3 main services that we do under Flavor Camp. So the in-person tastings are called like taste challenges, where people get to blind taste these products, provide feedback. The brands get their reports. That's my only in-person thing that I run, and I do like 6 different themes a year. And then the second one is I've been trying out all these different online challenges. So I think, again, a way that people can learn, or at least for me, is by doing. And so if I give you education, I want you to do something with that and take action with it to learn and put yourself out there and just, I don't know, have a fun adventure at home. So last year I tried a whole bunch of different programs. One was called like Sip and Snack, and I was trying to get people to create content or like taste test different spirits and food pairings, but found that it was just too much work for people to do that. And I've been kind of adapting, doing like an online cocktail challenge thing, but it's more so for like home bartenders versus working bartenders. That being said, I do have like working bartenders participate, and that's been really good actually, with just like every month doing a really fast cocktail sprint where all they have to do is submit a recipe, no presentation or photo required. And part of what I love to do is like visualizing stuff. And so the finalists, like I will professionally shoot their cocktails, so they're getting like a cool like imagery out of it as like you participate in one. But if I can get a brand to sponsor, they just help to cover like my time and obviously the pricing and stuff like that. But the brands ultimately get all these new cocktail recipes that can help, again, to inform them on maybe certain ingredients that people like using with their brand, or certain kind of recipes that are really popular in format, to help them with creating whatever their serves are in the future. So yeah, I've been experimenting with like lots of different things, and ultimately like all the creative projects or challenges or whatever, I always think about like the business case first. Like, can I monetize this? Will this make money? Because I have to be able to pay myself to continue to do this. And so that's always the first question before proceeding to launch something. And sometimes things work out, sometimes things don't. I would say like I've been trying to launch little products and serve like little products that people can buy, like tasting notebooks and binders that I think are like genius. And then they just don't sell at all. And I'm like, oh man, apparently people are not as excited as I thought about these things. Or maybe I'm just like not marketing them well. Yeah, some things work, some things don't. Some things make a turn, like don't work out at the beginning, and then later people get excited about them. So I think the journey of entrepreneurship is just constantly trying to innovate, but like within a certain set of like controls, and figuring out, again, like testing a whole bunch of stuff and then figuring out what does work and then how you can continue to expand that. But ultimately, I feel like people need to focus on just like one thing only, and they can have like maybe multiple things like services within it or products. But I've kind of amalgamated all my brands. So you talked about Whiskey Muse, and I still have the site and stuff, but I've like gotten rid of most of the remnants of that brand and just gone kind of all in on Flavor Camp, because I just recognize that having too many different projects, like people are confused. And so I'm just centralizing it all into like Flavor Camp, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. I've done the same thing with a lot of things. Before the pandemic, I had a bunch of different projects and companies and stuff, and trying to explain to people what I did just became such an absolute nightmare that I was just like, if I'm going to relaunch my consulting and everything, it's going to be one package and just under one brand. Do you find you should? I'm just thinking about those YouTube videos you made private. You should bring those back and like post. Post what you did, like what you start, where you like. There's a trend on TikTok. It's like how it started, how it's going. That would be perfect.
Or just you know how people like will play videos in the background and then they're commentating on it? I could like play myself and then just like shade myself and be like, what are you talking about? Who is this person?
And have you found like I think the those projects you've done that you get a taste and you're like, oh, okay, is this gonna stick? If it's not gonna stick, have you found that there's been something that you were like, okay, well, this didn't work, but then later on down the track somehow it got traction from the outskirts, and sort of then you're like, oh, wait a second, maybe it just was the wrong time that I launched that bit of my project, and now it's actually sticking and actually like gain traction?
I think the only thing I can think of that's like I've been constantly trying to reevaluate is just doing actual like whiskey and spirit reviews online and doing it in a way where it feels good to me and is authentic, and like I can still work with brands that want the, I don't know, social media posting and whatnot. So I'm doing some sort of like sponsorship thing where it's a paid review, I guess, but in a way that's like authentic still. And I just feel like there's almost like a format with how people typically review products, and I've just been trying to find a way that makes it unique for me. So from that, like I have my own scoring system and actually get people in my classes to use it 2 out of 50, which I know a lot do out of like 10 or 100. But there's like intentional inputs into that, and just again like actually establishing our own tasting system, being able to like have people practice determining what the flavor count profile of different products are is really cool. And I'm really trying to focus on that and getting people to like feel comfortable reviewing and communicating what they taste, for better or for worse. So yeah, I think that's like the only thing that has been good. And I would love to bring back having like a judging panel across Canada and reviews, but I'm just not quite sure yet how to do that, if that makes sense.
Sometimes people don't know, people like being judges of these competitions, because I know you're doing ADI next year. Like, people like being judges of the competition, but you never really see the judges being put on a social media post saying, this is what I liked about this product. It's
Yeah.
still very, very like closed cord, not overly
Yeah.
transparent. Like, I've
Yeah.
always loved doing single malts versus blends blind, and try to find blends and single malts that have very, very similar flavor profile. And I've done like 3 or 4 times now. None of the hardcore like whiskey nerds ever come, because they never want to be like caught out that they like blends over single malts. But Talisker Storm and Cuddy Sark Prohibition are so close together. There's a amount of times I've gone, oh crap, I've poured wrong, or I've poured 2 of
no
the
way.
same. But those 2 are so similar, and they're $40 different in bottle. But it's kind of crazy.
Cool.
How do you feel this year? Because this year brands have definitely been a little bit tighter on the budgets and stuff. How have you felt with building these strategic partnerships with brands and sort of trying to build these connections and fostering relationships? Because I think the hardest thing with any brand is that you have one person that you really have a great relationship with. You build it, you build it, you build it, and then they leave. Yeah, and then they leave. You got to restart it. How do you keep abreast of those sort of things, especially when there's not as many people in the market? Like, you were in sales before the pandemic. Obviously, post pandemic, they still haven't brought back a full sales force like they used to. Like,
Yeah, they never replaced my position.
yeah, like we're just getting a brand rep here for a company that hasn't had someone on the island for 5 years, and we're just getting someone back now. And so, how do you keep building those strategic partnerships so that you can, because it is a big lifeblood for your company?
I don't know if I have an actual answer for this. It's so I think from the outside, people are like, "Oh, Reece is crushing it. She's doing so much," because that's what social media wants you to think. But to be honest, like I'm constantly pitching nonstop, like new ideas, trying to figure out what the brands want, or like reshaping the ideas I have to fit what their directives are, KPIs. Like again, just from a business perspective, I'm always want to keep it creative, but at the same time, I'm like asking brand reps, like, what are your KPIs this year? Like, what can you spend money on? And how can I help you to make your job easier so you can use your budget? And I'm going to take things off the table for you so you don't have to worry about doing them. And I can do them for you. And then you give me money to do that. So I think like there's not a exact answer. And if there was, then I'd be making a lot more, or have a lot more partnerships right now, because every agency is like looking for different things. But yeah, it's all just like a relationship building experience. And it does suck when people move to other portfolios. But I think if you're building those relationships, just like with bartenders or bar managers, like with the person themselves and not the brands, then they'll continue to want to work with you regardless of where they land, right? So I think that's a big thing, but it's constantly like, I'm constantly asking myself, how can I do something that they wouldn't be able to do in house?
Mm.
And maybe that's they don't have the budget to hire a full-time brand ambassador. So if you want me to do brand ambassador work for you, done. But I have this flavor camp tasting system, so I want to infuse your brands into like my method of
Hmm.
doing things. So it's like building my personal brand as well. Or again, maybe they want to see how they compare against their competitors, so they can't run tastings like that. So done, they'll participate in those programs because
Yeah.
then they get market insight from an expert. So it's just constantly trying to figure out and asking like what they want and need, so then I can like fill that void. And then same thing with like my uh, my membership, I guess, or group, the like flavor camp group. It's I'm constantly like slightly adjusting the way that I do the education and communicate the information, and it's just like trying to figure out and get feedback so I can give people what they want. I guess
I
also
think
and then give it to them.
I think the big thing you said, like, and I'm guilty of this in a big way. As a hospitality people, like you're always up for giving away your time for free to brands
Yeah,
because you're like, oh, I'm going to build my personal brand. I'm going to build my personal brand, or I got to build some value for these people, like for these brands. Like it's the worst thing now as I get older. I still feel guilty charging money, and I shouldn't feel guilty charging money for my services.
hmm,
And I think as hospitality people, we're always like, oh, you know what? I'll do a couple of cocktails for you for free. Just chuck us some
yeah,
product, and it'll be really cool. And I think that's one thing that you've said that you always look at. Okay, am I making money from this? Can I monetize this in the best possible way? Because I think, especially when you
yeah.
go out on your own, you can get caught in a hole real quick if you aren't thinking about that.
Yeah. Like I don't want, I guess this is another conversation I have very oftentimes with other like content creators or even bartenders where yeah, there is definitely a time and place where you could volunteer and maybe just getting your name out there is worth the, I don't know, pouring for a brand or something, or
Hmm.
getting a couple bottles because you love that brand. But I'm just at the point now where I'm saying, like, constantly trying to tell people that their time is valuable. And it's like, if you feel good about giving away your time for free, that's great. But ultimately, these brands have money and they're going to take advantage of your kindness if you let them. And they have money dedicated to hiring people. And I don't know, you wouldn't go into a bar and be like, oh, I'll bartend for you for free so I can
Mm.
experience. Like maybe you get paid minimum wage and no tips, but you're still getting paid in some capacity. And I just think like cash is king ultimately. So I always try and charge an amount if I'm doing something for a brand plus product, right? Versus just doing something for product. And like, I don't know, some people might agree with me, some might not, but those brand reps, they're not working for free. They're on salary. They're getting paid to do stuff
Hmm.
with. So why would you do stuff for free for them ultimately? I don't know.
What
That's
advice would you give someone looking to get into uh, the experiential hospitality entrepreneurship sort of sphere? What sort of advice would you give that person who is trying to make that jump from late nights bartending to like something legit?
honestly, it's hard, man. Like again, I feel like I definitely feel comfortable being in kind of finishing my second year of being self-employed, but you definitely need to be comfortable with not having consistent income. Like, and it's scary. So for me, I'm really fortunate. Like, well, fortunate is not the right word, but I don't have kids. And so I just have a lot more time, flexibility, and don't need as much, I guess, income because I'm not supporting other humans. I was going to say I don't have a mortgage either, but my partner and I just bought a townhouse. We'll soon to have a mortgage, but yeah, just being okay with like income flexibility and growth and being kind to yourself is really challenging because I feel like we're all masochists in this industry. But um, that's not really giving advice. I would say, like, if you're looking to make the leap, just start while you still have a job,
Mm.
and figuring out things that you're enjoying doing, and ask yourself, like, is this monetizable? And then if yes, is this scalable? Because I know a lot of people that are like, oh, tastings are the best. Like, I love running tastings. And I'm like, okay, that's great that you do this a couple times a year and it's successful and you have a great turnout for it. But if you're trying to do this every week, you're just going to saturate your
Hmm.
people, and it's just not going to lead to like a full-time thing. So you need to find things that are scalable, in terms of income potential, and whether they scale or not. Like, that needs to be your first question: is, can I make a full-time living off of this? Instead of just being like, oh, I like doing it and it's fun and I can make some money off of it, right? Like, you have to think of the business side of it first before you choose to go all in on
Mm.
working for yourself. Um, yeah.
What's the plan for the next 6 to 12 months for Flavor Camp and yourself?
Yeah, so for me, like, as I just mentioned, my partner and I purchased a townhouse in Calgary. So I'm going to be moving in a couple weeks. I'm not sure when this is going to go on the internet, but yeah. So my big plan for the next 6 to 12 months is expanding the Flavor Camp in-person tasting challenges to Calgary. And so I'm still intending on running them in Vancouver as well, and they'll just kind of mirror each other, where the brands that I'm currently pitching, like, the value add is I'm wanting to be national so I can provide national
Hmm.
insight, right, across the country on what consumers are liking and market trends and all that jazz. And so my big push will be, I guess, developing out the Calgary market, and running these taste challenges multi provincially. And then there's a couple people in the US that I'm like looking to partner with just to run some and see how it goes. Like, I think long term, somehow being able to franchise the brand and like the system in which I teach and conduct classes is the only way that it could be scaled, because I can only be in one place at once. And
Hmm.
I don't have any ego around needing to be the one that's like actually facilitating the experiences. I just like doing the creative strategy. It's probably my favorite part of what I do. So I'm going to be test piloting a few different places in the US, I think, next year, with it. And then, yeah, there's just, I have all my programs and I've started pitching for next year, and it's just expanding them to be a bit more national than what they are now. And so I feel like this past year I had a million new ideas of new revenue streams that I wanted to implement, but realistically, I'm like, I just don't have the time to do it. So I need to be really intentional about focusing on a couple things and doing them really
Hmm.
well, instead of like a million things like I've been formerly doing and then doing them mediocrely. And like, one thing I did want to note too is, as I've been growing and building, like, it hasn't been all sunshine and rainbows. Like, I've definitely made mistakes. I feel like there's certain agencies that probably don't want to work with me because they didn't feel like the value was there, or like the first iterations of the Flavor Camp, I was just asking way too much questions and asking for way too much information, and just processing that information was just so slow and inefficient and terrible. The reports were not great. And
Hmm.
so I kind of like learned from that, and downsized and become more like concise about certain things. And so, yeah, I mean, you're gonna like break some eggs when you're making the omelet, so to speak.
Anyone who follows you on social media knows that you're a bit of a gym junkie. And how do you balance out being like this
Oh man.
hyper alpha, like super intense entrepreneur, and then also having being grounded enough that you make time for the gym? And like I've seen, even when you travel, you still making sure that you hit the gym on a regular basis. How do you keep that work-life balance really healthy for you?
Um, for me, I would say it's become, so in my younger years, like, I'm in my mid 30s now. I guess before that, like, I didn't really go to the gym and was like, I'd say like chubby when I was younger and insecure, and then started going to the gym and was like, oh my God, the gym is awesome. And now I'm kind of doing it more for like long-term health and wellness more than like aesthetic purposes. But to be honest, like I self-shame a lot and have been feeling, I know on the internet it looks like I work out a lot, but I've been feeling sad about it since I've started because I'm working out a lot less than I used to when I just had like a more set schedule, 9 to 5 type of job. And so I would say I go like 3 to 4 days a week on average, which is good. But I've just found something that I really like and that challenges me as a competitive person. Like I do CrossFit, which is a combination of like so many different things. There's like cardio, there's, I don't know, gymnastics, there's weightlifting, there's Olympic lifting. And so for me, I really like that. And going to classes where there's variety and I just show up and don't have to think and I'm at the whim of the instructor telling me what to do is really nice. And so I find it not relaxing, but just a good way to kind of expend negative energy that I like expend it out of my body and just push myself. But again, I think that like every person needs to exercise in some capacity. It doesn't need to be CrossFit, but just being able to physically move your body. And in the industry, like as a bartender, just, yeah, exercising is so important to your physical health and wellness, I think, with just as you get older, like not being sore from working a long shift and stuff like that. So I don't know. I just think it's like a necessity. Like it's like a non-negotiable to go at least 3 days a week for me, and try to walk because I like just going outside and listening to podcasts and stuff. But yeah, I just think it's like a necessity for life. And yeah, even yesterday I was like reorganizing my storage locker and had these like massive 125-liter totes that I was just like carrying and stuff. And I'm like, man, if I didn't weightlift, I would not be able to do this myself and just move everything around without absolutely dying. So yeah, I just think it's a necessity.
So we're at the 5 deep questions that I ask every guest on the podcast. What is the one lesson that has shaped your perspective the most, and how do you carry that forward in life?
I think the biggest lesson off the top of my head is just asking for what you want. And worst case, people say no, but you're no further behind than where you were if you didn't ask. So I just really think about that. And rejection is a necessary part of just becoming more and more successful, right? Yeah.
If you could leave one lasting message or piece of wisdom for the world, what would it be and why?
I think my lasting message would be find your community and give to it ultimately, because that's going to make you feel good. Like doing things for other people will make you feel good.
Looking back on your journey, what is something you wish you had understood earlier in life?
Just going back to my first answer, I think waiting around and for people to come to you is not a good strategy for just growth as a person, and just taking the plunge to go out of your comfort zone to do things that make you uncomfortable. Again, like asking for things and being okay with being like people saying no is, I wish I had done that sooner.
How do you define success, and has your definition of it changed over time?
Yeah, I think for me, there's definitely like a financial component to success where it's like, oh, I want to make X amount of dollars. And as I was younger, that was like the only indication of success for me. But now I think it's more being able to do something that you love, or have found a glimmer of passion for, and make that your career is what I would say is successful for sure. And having time to actually have hobbies and spend time with your family.
What do you hope your legacy will be, and what steps are you taking to build it?
Sorry, can you say that again?
What do you hope your legacy will be, and what steps are you taking to build it?
Oh my gosh. That's a big question. All of these are big questions.
The five last deep questions of the episode.
I'm never gonna die, I hope. I think my legacy, I'm just determined to disrupt the spirits industry, and I want people to, again, have a new perspective on the current situation. That's not very descriptive, but it would just be like, oh, Reece Sims was the pioneer that created Flavor Camp, for example, and this is the universal system that we're using to taste and relate and compare different spirits. So that's kind of my lasting legacy I'm working on right now.
That's perfect. Well, Reece, thank you so much. Like for how long we've known each other, I'm just always blown away with everything you do. And like, I brought you to Victoria to do Flavor Camp here. I know a lot of the team in Victoria really enjoyed Flavor Camp, and I think it's a very, very unique way of doing things. It breaks it down to the most simplest ways so that people don't feel like it's that intense, pressured, like if you say something you're wrong sort of mentality, which you get at a lot of whiskey tastings. So I'm just always blown away with what you've created, and I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show.
Likewise, thank you so much, and I'm always amazed with everything you're doing as well.
Thank you. I'll chat to you very, very, very soon.
Okay.
Have a good day. Bye. Thanks for listening, Pose Shifters. I hope you enjoyed that episode. I really enjoy sitting down with friends and peers and just chatting about the industry and getting down to the nuts and bolts of what's really going on out there. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, everything on all the platforms. Just hit it up and I'll do my best to answer any queries or questions you have. I'll see you next week, guys. Bye.